All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. I'm switching gears for this video. For the first time in this series, I'm joined by a fellow journalist and also another avid music fan. This gentleman and myself, we've been hitting the ball back and forth online for probably a good 16 years, 17 years at this
Wow,
point.
is that right? Wow.
So
Yeah, that
I
sounds
knew
right.
I had to get this guy on. It's my pleasure to welcome from New York, Mr. Alex Smith. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's sobering. 16 years. Well, I mean, I guess I'm trying to, like I said, we were before the show started, we were trying to slap a date on it. I mean, I probably first heard of you because of, I know you don't want to talk about it, your first Prong book.
Mm.
Uh, but I'm wondering were you a member of the Gathering? Was that a thing for you? I'm trying to think where else we may have crossed paths
You know
initially.
what? I think it was probably The Gathering first. And for those who are watching who don't know, The
Right.
Gathering is the fan base for the band Killing Joke, which I suspect we'll be getting into at some point in this conversation.
Inevitably.
Wasn't The Gathering, this goes back a long time. I know there's The Gathering, which is eternal.
An amorphous sort of thing, yeah.
But this gathering, it was like an email digest, right?
Right, right. It was a email group started by, oh God, I don't even, I don't, I can't, I don't, I wouldn't want to put a name to the specific individual that launched it, but it dates back to, I guess, like 1998, 1999. That's I think when I first got involved with it.
Mm,
And it was a comparatively primitive mode of what would later morph into basically the crux of social media, where people were just contributing to ongoing threads and sharing bits of trivia and ephemera and information about the band. And band members themselves would Raven basically joined at one point very
mm.
famously. The other guys not so much, but and that was that seemed like invaluable. And and it grew this little community of devoted Killing Joke fans who still in kind of still exist in one form or another today, but the email list is long over. But yeah.
Yeah, around that time, maybe a bit earlier, there used to be a Misfits email digest as well.
Yes, I'm sure.
You
Yeah.
know, and that was mid 90s, even before the official, the Michael Graves era
Right,
happened.
right.
People were kind of gathering for the Misfits at that period of time. So that stuff was kind of around a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s. But yes, Killing Joke was a subject of one. And I'm very, very certain that's how you and I first crossed paths.
Probably.
And then we've been discussing and sometimes debating music and culture ever since.
Pretty much. Were you ever a member of not to sideline your trajectory there, but it's an online discussion board called ILX. You ever hear that?
No, no.
Oh, well, ILX was yeah, it was set up as a more open, multifaceted music discussion board. Anybody could start a thread about any topic, really. And at one point, somebody posted a thread called Killing Joke Classic or Dud and invited people to weigh in on what they thought. And someone over on the gathering got wind of that and said, like, oh, let's go set the record straight.
Mm.
So we descended on that with all guns blazing. And then I decided, like, oh, this is actually kind of a cool thing because it's not just one band. And I love Killing Joke, but I'm besotted with millions of other bands. So I stuck around on that and contributed mightily. I've met a slew of people through that, so I'm wondering if that could have played a factor, but I guess not. But yeah, I mean, there are these little furtive communities of music fans out there that there's a multiplicity of platforms for that sort of thing. So
Yeah, and what's really cool is, there are certainly pockets on Facebook, for example, devoted to Killing Joke.
right.
There's the Church of Killing Joke, there's a few others. And there are characters on those pages that I've known since MySpace
Oh
era,
yeah,
even
absolutely.
before, and there's a lot about that band that, kind of lends itself to that kind of longevity. We'll get into that in a bit, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But let me get into your life and career. This is your life, Alex Smith.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about the writing first, because you have been a professional writer.
Yep.
Let me throw out some of the publications you've written for: The New Yorker, Time, Entertainment Weekly, Cream, New York Perspectives, In Fashion, New York Review of Records. So, I mean, that's a very long list of places that have given you a home as a writer over the years. Um, when did writing first become um, one of your directions in life? And of course, the direction that became a professional pursuit for you as well.
I mean, I guess probably in college, I, like everybody else, I needed to figure out what my direction was going to be, what my area of interest, what my pursuit was going to be. I went to a college called Denison University, which is out in Central Ohio, about half an hour outside of Columbus. Um, and there was not a journalism program there at the time. There is now, and a great one, I might add. But so I became an English writing major because I figured no matter what I want to end up doing, it's never going to serve me poorly to be able to string a coherent sentence together, unless, of course, I go into engineering or molecular biology. I don't know, whatever. I just thought it was a good skill to have, and I enjoyed doing it. And I also was already doing stuff like the, college newspaper and the yearbook and all that sort of stuff. And I was a college radio DJ, all the cliches. And basically, when I graduated, I knew I wanted to go into publishing, which is not the most lucrative field, as you may know. And so I chose the bottom rung on the ladder of respectable fields of journalism. I went into music journalism, and I got an internship at Spin. This is after college, no less, not a proper job, an internship that did not pay, in 1989. And I got that from, once I graduated, I just sent out letters to pretty much anything I read with any regularity. And Spin was, at the time, still a great magazine. I mean, it produced writers like John Leland, and, Glenn O'Brien wrote for them, and Legs McNeil, and all these other folks who I thought were great. Charles Aaron. And miraculously, they wrote back saying, "Yeah, do you want to come be an intern?" So I did. And, internships, by and large, this is back then, especially, were not great. Like, I had to go get people's lunch, it was pretty shitty. But I got to meet a lot of people. And I guess I demonstrated my commitment, and doors started to open up. I was there for about a year as an intern, which is kind of ridiculous. And this one week, there was an editor whose name I won't use, who was the managing editor at the time, and he was like, "Alex, what are your future plans?" And I was like, "Well, I'm looking to stick around and keep doing this." He goes, "Let's talk next week." I was like, "Great, let's talk next week." So next week rolls around, and that editor got fired. And he was replaced by somebody else who brought in a new kid of his own to be an editorial assistant. So the job that I was conceivably being groomed for went to somebody else. So, but prior to that, I had met a number of writers, and one of which was this guy named Brad Balfour. I'm going to mention his name. And Brad Balfour was starting a magazine and looking for any editorial help he could find. And he was going to call it the New York Review of Records, not to be confused with the New York Review of Books. His idea was that we'll get sued by the New York Review of Books, and there'll be great publicity, whatever. So, having nothing else to do, I started working with him, which was really a grassroots sort of organization. But he knew loads and loads of people. And, like, through that, I can't even begin to list the people. I mean, the first name that comes to mind is this gentleman named Chris Needs, who's the storied British journalist who had been, the founder of Zigzag magazine, and, just an incredible character. I'd known him because he'd been working behind the counter at Bleecker Bob's, and he's just this hilarious British guy. But he was just a font of knowledge about, like, here I'd walk into the office wearing a Killing Joke shirt. He used to live with those guys. Like, he was just wonderful. But, like, so I met folks like that all the time, and very shortly had amassed a great sort of network of fellow journalists and fellow music fans. But at the same time, it wasn't making any money. So I decided that it would be prudent to get, like, a day job and continue doing. I'd freelance music write on the side. So I luckily first got a gig as a copy clerk at Life magazine. And sounds weird and to say this, but it was before the internet. So like my job is basically to sit next to a printer, and when stuff came out of it, I would pick it up, see whose name was on it, run down the hall and give it to them, you know. So but that had me running around, and they're like, "Hey, that kid's going places," you know. So I did that for a while. That turned into a full-time gig, and then I worked at the Life magazine news desk for a while. And this is at the same time writing for a bunch of the music mags you had just listed. And so I was like working by day, going out to shows by night, meeting new people, learning new things. And I got laid off from Life, and somebody, a colleague from Time Magazine, which of course is in the same building, same company, plucked me out of that and threw me to work for Time. And I started doing pickup editorial work there for a while. And then I got a job at the Time Magazine news desk, which was a much more demanding gig that didn't leave me as much time to do the other stuff. But that was an amazing. I mean, I learned more at Time Magazine in 12 years than I did at any school. Met some brilliant people, had some amazing experiences. I got a few little things published. Um, Around the same time, I was fortunate enough to meet an editor at the New Yorker who was looking for someone to handle music writing for the Goings On About Town section. And a friend of mine introduced me to him, and he's like, "Well, your friend Alex has got a lot of opinions about music." And he's like, "Yes, he does, and you should have him write for you." And I would have done it for free. Are you kidding? I didn't get a byline, which is kind of a drag, but it paid. And my gig was basically I was writing blurbs about the bands that your average New Yorker reader would never go to, you know, like the Butthole Surfers or Slayer or, you know, whatever. So it was fun. Like I said, I would have done it for free. The fact that I got a check every other week for, you know, $500, $600 for it was just like found money, you know. So I did that for 10 years. After 12 years of time, I was working 2 overnight shifts a week, which was a little rigorous.
Mm.
So, and by that point, I got married, I had a child. I needed to change gears. So, I'm just giving you my resume now. An opportunity arose via MTV News, which seemed like an unlikely spot, but a friend of mine had heard about the opportunity and tipped me to it. And overnight, I suddenly became the managing editor of MTV News Online. And this is about 2006.
Hmm.
And at the time, MTV in general was more concerned with the neo burgeoning teen pop a la, you know, Britney and Sync and all that stuff, and hip hop. And suffice to say, these are not my immediate areas of interest, but I figured, well, they may not be my areas of interest, but as a music fan, I know what sort of information music fans want. So that was my impetus going into it. And I stuck around there for 2 years until I got laid off. And then worked at a number of different places like MSN. And then I went over to today.com, which, while a good, well paying gig, was not the greatest fit for me because I think the editorial sensibility of the show and the program wasn't necessarily in line with my own. But you know, I was there for about 4 years, and then I got laid off from there. And end of that long story is all the while I've been writing, by the way. But I got a job at a performing rights organization working in the corporate communications department, and so I'm basically using the same skill set I had from my years in journalism, and I pair it with my love of music. So it's kind of a dream get. I mean, I'm obviously not everybody I'm writing about is an artist I'm besotted with, but you know, it's a good gig. So cool. And I'm continuing. I mean, I started a blog in about 2005, which amazingly I'm still doing,
Hmm.
and that became my primary outlet in terms of expression. I mean, I will still certainly write for any outfit that'll have me as long as it's not a conflict of interest with the organization I work for. I'm always looking for, you know, things to stay busy and trying to new ways to share whatever I know about these subjects. But yeah, so that's basically it in a nutshell there, Joel.
And the name of your blog is?
Oh dear. It's Flaming Pablum, which is not a name I'm particularly besotted with. Basically, it had an several iterations initially, and I eventually got tired of changing the name, and I came up with Flaming Pablum, and it just stuck. And I'm reminded of an interview on MTV with this Australian band called Died Pretty
Mhm.
a million years ago, and someone asked them like, "Why Died Pretty?" And they said, "It means nothing. It's a name on a marquee that means we're playing there." That's kind of the way I feel about Flaming Pablum at this point. It's like just that's just the name of the blog.
Yeah.
I initially conceived it as flaming being at the time internet lingo for speaking derisively about somebody, and pablum just means simplistic writing. So it's self-deprecating, which enables me to, set the tone. But it's not topically tethered to any one subject. I can write about anything, but 9 times out of 10, I'm writing about music and New York City and my experiences with both.
Well, I was just thinking, even before the gathering, the gathering is when I connected the dots as to who you were.
Okay.
Because years prior, I want to say it was maybe 2005-ish,
Okay.
I was starting to look at the possibility of doing music journalism under my own steam. I started my career running a music magazine,
Mhm.
and that, as they all do, they don't last. Ended up doing
Right. Mhm.
ended up doing automotive journalism, which I did for 20 years. Had a short stint when I was out in LA running a gambling publication. So
Really?
yeah, I was kind of messing around with the idea of doing what I ended up doing, with the books and the website and now this channel. So right off the bat, I didn't know where it was going to go and how it would take shape. But I knew I wanted to write about Killing Joke, who's been my favorite band since I was 11 years old, if not
Wow.
young. So scouring the internet, the primitive internet that in those days, I'm like, somebody did an interview with Big Paul.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that was, of course, you, and that was on your blog. But it was the first time I had ever seen anyone do an interview with Paul.
Right.
So that was actually my introduction to your work. I'm going to use that as a segue to a question because you have certainly, over that part of your career, the journo part, interviewed tons of people.
Mhm.
And the numbers grow the longer you're into this business. And you turn around, you've got hundreds of people under your belt before you even conceptualize that. Having said that, who remain some of the most memorable or surreal encounters you've had with musicians in that line of work?
Oh wow. Well, I mean, it's funny. It's funny. I probably should have prefaced with the Paul interview. I just real quick about how that came about. Um, as I mentioned, Raven had been an active participant on the gathering, and after he'd been on and exchanging messages with everybody for 3 or 4 months, he sort of sussed out who was who and who did what, and he reached out to me privately saying, "Hey, I really want somebody where we want to put together an authoritative book about Killing Joke," which Jazz Coleman, lead singer, had always said, "Oh, no one can ever do this because they'll never crack the code. They'll never infiltrate our tight circle." But Raven had other ideas, and he's like, "Someone needs to talk to Big Paul." And ironically, only about a month earlier, I'd been walking south on Lafayette Street and run into him on the street, run into Big Paul Ferguson on the corner of West Fourth, right down from where Tower Records used to be. And being, Johnny fanboy, I was like, blurted out of my mouth, like, "Paul Ferguson." And he was like, "Whoa," you know, and he sort of somewhat taken aback, but incredibly thoughtful. I don't know if you've met him. You must have met him after all these times. Just an incredibly thoughtful, nice guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, "I'm so sorry. I'm just a huge fan," and whatever. And then Raven gets in touch and said, like, "You need to talk to him. I'm gonna call him. We're gonna set this up, and you're gonna interview him for this book." And I was like, "Count me up." So sure enough, I gave him a call, and he was living in Brooklyn at the time, and we divined an hour, a time to do it, and I went out there, and we had a lovely afternoon over a couple of beers, and in both in a nearby bar, and then his home studio. and we had this really exhaustive interview that touched on a whole range of aspects of what he'd done with the band and what he'd been doing after the band and how he felt about things. And so I do that, and I'm like, okay, mission accomplished. And then the book doesn't really go anywhere after that. Like, it wasn't just me. Like, Raven had an idea in his head, and I don't know who else was involved, but I was happy to contribute in any way I could. But then nothing happened. As is, there's Killing Joke was notorious for like making plans that didn't always come to fruition. So
I say
yeah,
no.
I know. I don't want to cite any examples, but they're out there. So here I was sitting on this, as you said, like nobody talked to Paul most of the time, and so suddenly I've got this trove of information. And I think if you go back to that post, I I preface it with this like, I'll take this down the second somebody has a problem with it. But
Mhm.
I don't want to see the work go to waste. And I think it because I think it's really great. And I think it's not in a self-aggrandizing way, but just like for the community of fans and just to clear the air, there's a lot of information here that I think is worth sharing. So I put it up. I didn't think, I mean, I had Paul's blessing to do so. And by this point, I believe can't remember if Raven had passed away as yet. Um, but so I put it out there, and then oh no, he hadn't.
No,
Shortly thereafter, he did, and Paul went to the funeral, as did the rest of the guys. And I don't, I'll never be able to confirm this, but I really want to believe that the posting of that interview helped
yeah.
ease, ease the tensions, so to speak, and get them back into the place they needed to go in terms of reconnecting and everything. I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I like to believe that, but who knows? But yeah, so obviously Killing Joke, uh, first and foremost, always happy to speak with any of them. And sometimes not always easy, like even though they could not find a more, ardent supporter, Jazz Coleman can be a very difficult guy to speak with. Jordy was very enigmatic. I did do one interview with him at this bar on Avenue A called the No Tell Motel. And Jordy gave a sort of very dispassionate interview. Then, with the sort of sleight of hand of a seasoned pickpocket, he sort of got hold of my tape recording device at one point and rewound it. So I sort of lost at least half of our chat, which I was pissed off about, of course, but he did it so gracefully that I had to admire it. But yeah, so those guys are always amazing. In terms of I don't know, it was always interesting to speak with people you admire. They always say like you shouldn't meet your heroes. Sometimes that's true, but other times not at all. Like, there were some people who I would sit down with somebody and have very firm preconceptions about what they were all about and come away with a completely different impression.
Yeah.
And I think that was always sort of illuminating and refreshing, and that kept me interested. I'm like, oh wow, like who knew that this individual had so much to say, or not in some instances. Like I remember I had a few I wouldn't call them disastrous, but I wouldn't say they were like, I had a with Guy, I can't remember his last name, Guy from a band called Thin White Rope,
Mhm.
who I quite liked, and we just didn't connect. Like he gave me the 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 rudimentary information I needed to write a story, but it was just like you could tell he wasn't especially enthused. I spoke with Andrew from the Sisters over the phone, which was not ideal, of course, but I took what I could get. And I obviously his reputation precedes him, but I found him actually to be really kind of amenable. Like he was nice. At one point, however, like we're having a perfectly pleasant conversation, line goes dead, and I'm like, oh fuck, what did I do? What did I say to trigger him or whatever? And I'd only been on with him for a little bit, so I frantically dial him back, and he was like, "Oh, sorry about that." Like line went. So I don't, who knows, but he was fine. Um, uh, who was great was Andy Preboy, who was
Mhm.
you may remember him as the second vocalist for Wall of Voodoo.
Yeah.
He was hilarious. I mean, he was just really super nice guy. Just went off on a million different tangents. I think we exchanged phone numbers after that. Like we should hang out sometime. We never did, but just a good guy. Oh, so here's a fun one. In I think it's 2001. I'm working at Time Magazine. Joey Ramone passes away. Now, as was the habit at Time, whenever a prominent public figure passed away, they would get another prominent public figure to write a eulogy of sorts. So, I go to the story meeting that morning, as I always did. I never spoke at the story meeting. I was just a lowly news desk editor. But the topic of Joey Ramone passing away comes up, and editors are bandying names around, and they're like, we should get John Lydon to do it. And I raise my hand. This is like my first time I'm speaking at a story meeting in however many years. I'm like, no, don't do that. John Lydon has never had anything positive to say about the Ramones. He will not do it. He may leap at the chance to say something to Time Magazine, but it's not going to be what you want.
Yeah.
You should get Bono. Because the Ramones, I mean, U2 wouldn't shut up about how pivotal a role the Ramones, even though you couldn't necessarily hear it in their music. They were the first to say that the Ramones changed the trajectory of their career. So suddenly Jim Kelly, the managing editor, looks at me and goes, all right, Alex, make it happen. And so suddenly, whoa, I got to go do it now. And prior to that, I'd been used to being this sort of, you know, bottom feeder music journalist for all these sort of more, smaller magazines. And suddenly I'm working within the matrix of Time Magazine, and all the red tape that you normally have to unspool to get access to whatever artist goes right out the window. And, I'm hooked up with Paul McGuinness's office, and he's like, well, they're on tour in Germany right now, but call this number tomorrow morning at yada yada, and you'll plug right into Bono. And so I only really need Bono to give me a few sound bites to write this. It's basically, he's going to be not dictating, but he's going to basically express his feelings. It's one little piece. But suffice to say, Bono being Bono, he went off on volumes of way more information than I ever could have possibly needed, called me back with more. And I was like, I can't thank you enough, but this is more than enough. And it's like, well, okay, well, you have any further questions, give me a call, whatever. He could not have been, say what you want about U2, especially here in 2024, but he was remarkably cool about it, and I'll always remember him. And I got the piece published, it did well and everything else, but that was definitely probably the biggest name I've managed to interview. But yeah, so those are just a few. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the Bono story um kind of leads to something I've always believed based on my experience, and that is the higher up the supposed food chain you get with
Right.
artists, the easier they are to work with, and the more
Could
accessible.
be.
The biggest names I worked with are people you think there's no way, and they're the first people to call me back, the first people to respond to an email, the first people the next day to say, right back, good talking to you. Let me know if you need anything else. When you get into like the indie world,
Yeah.
that's where the shit bags start to float, honestly.
Yeah. I will say this though. When earlier on in my career, because I was working in journalism, let alone music journalism, I wasn't making a lot of money. So I had moved out. I mean, obviously graduated college. I moved back home. So I'm living with my mom, which sounds terrible, but she was actually great. And, she went away every weekend. So it wasn't as bad as it sounds, but it was still mom's house. And so in the thick of working with, New York View Records and doing stuff for Cream, whatever, I'm constantly calling and hustling and trying to line up new interviews with bands and whatever. And I remember at one point I called Discord Records. So, Fugazi had something out relatively recent to that. And I thought, oh, I'd love to talk to them. And I remember leaving a message with somebody and thinking, well, that's never going to come to any fruition. And about 2 days later, I'm coming home from my gig at Life magazine, I guess. And my mom is like, oh, you got a call from a very nice young man named Ian. Apparently, my mom had a nice chat with Ian from Fugazi, which was fun. And then about a month later, I similarly had reached out to Martin Atkins because I guess he was, I don't know, was it Damage Incorporated or Murder
Damage
Incorporated?
Manual.
No, it was prior to Damage Man. I think it was Murder Incorporated was what he was sort of
Right.
promoting at the time. and there'd been a LA based magazine called Exit that wanted me to do something, and I had interviewed him for that, and then he had thought it was for Exit, which was the transgressive magazine that this guy named George Petros put out. So he
Mhm.
didn't know it was for a different Exit. So he was calling back to say like, no, don't run it in that. Da, 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 da. And again, I was out. And so Martin ended up having like a half-hour chat with my mom. So my mom, you've met all these punk rock greats. Yeah. Um, that was always fun. But it was surprising how accessible some of those people were, even though they could sometimes be, you know, difficult. But I never really I remember I interviewed John S. Hall from King Missile once, and he was like, I think he was like sick as a dog. And I interviewed him at this club, in a club, like it's more of like a bar, coffee shop situation called Chenet on St. Mark Place. And he was nice, but he spent the entire time kind of moaning about how sick he was and also how Atlantic Records was screwing them over. And it
Mm.
was just like, come on, man, you can give me something better than this. But and he was actually, to this day, we're friendly and all that. It was just, but it was one of those things like, not every interview is going to be, rapturous rock and roll. I had a really bad interview with EMF too,
Mm.
uh, which involved. I'm trying to make this quick. So Brad Balfour, I mentioned earlier, had me review their record. And I don't know, I was the go-to guy for reviewing, Brit indie pop, but apparently I was. And EMF wasn't my thing. I wasn't needlessly nasty, but I didn't do them any favors either.
Mm.
And I just sort of said, this type of thing you like if you like that type of thing. But it wasn't, by no means was it a complimentary review, I'm sad to say. So about a month later, EMF come to town, and Brad again says, you should go and interview them. The problem was he wanted to come with, which I wasn't wild about, but okay, he's the editor. So I go, this is the restaurant of some hotel in Midtown, and there's two of them. It's like the bass player and the sampler guy. And they're like fresh-faced young Brits, first time in New York. Couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been cooler. And I'm immediately feeling like a heel. Because it's like, how many hit albums have I written? Like these guys are just doing what they're doing. And halfway through the interview, they ask politely, like, so what magazine is this for? And Brad lights up like a pinball machine and goes, oh, it's for this. And we reviewed your album, and smacks down issues in front of each of them, opens that page. I'm like,
Mm.
oh my God. And this was a very valuable lesson. So these guys read the review that I wrote of their record right in front of me. And I'm turning 13 shades of purple. And Brad, I'm at the time livid with, because you should really know the copy in your own magazine. And they very professionally and politely get up, but very much interview over, and they walk out. And Brad's like, well, we're not going to go upstairs with them. It was just this, I was mortified and embarrassed, but it was always like, you know what? Things you write, even if it's for a small, tiny periodical, can and will get back to the subject of that you're writing about. So it's always good to just be cognizant of that, because it's very easy, and it's, I'll admit it's even fun to write a negative review, but you know, it comes with consequences, and I'll never
Well,
do that again.
it reminds me, real quick aside, because this is about you, not me, but it does remind me of
It's a
something.
conversation, man. Don't worry.
Um, I've written a lot about Gang of Four.
Yeah.
That's the band I've written about the most, actually.
Really?
And I have a policy with myself with that band. I call it as I see it because I love that fucking band so
Oh
much.
yeah.
And, Andy comes out with, the first album without John King or
Yeah.
any of the other guys. It was okay, and I kind of eloquently wrote that I thought it was okay. Wasn't a glowing review, wasn't a terrible review. It was kind of middling,
Right. Right. Right.
And so I sent it off to, his publicist and the team, and thinking I'll never hear from them again. And
Right.
they wrote back, it's like, by the way, Andy really appreciates how well thought out your review was. I'm like, oh, how nice. So I end up, I do a phoner with Andy a bit later. Then I get the invite to go see him in Boston,
Hmm.
that incarnation, and they blew that night.
Oh no.
It was just not good. And again, eloquently state they blew, and I'm like, I gotta call it as I see it.
Yeah, no, of course.
So I published that review. And then like a year or so later goes by, they put out a new EP. I'm like,
I
this is
think I hate to
goddamn-
say it. I think I have it right behind me. It's up here. Yeah, keep going. Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
this is pretty goddamn good.
Yeah.
So I'm like eloquently putting, this one doesn't suck, guys. This is really good. And they actually share it online and stuff. And then I get an email, Andy would like to meet you
Uh-oh.
when they come to Boston. They're on tour with the Faint, I think it was.
Remember them? Yeah.
And I'm like, oh dear. Uh-oh. You know. So
Danger, Will Robinson.
I go to the show, same lineup,
Yeah.
totally different experience. They burned that place down. I mean, they were so goddamn good, you know, up there with the original good, you know.
Wow.
I mean, they were incredible. And then, and his manager comes over. Okay, Andy wants to talk to you now, and I'm like, oh shit. Couldn't have been a nicer guy, all smiles, happy as hell.
Super, super, super thoughtful guy, by the way. Yeah. I mean,
Oh
like,
yeah, like he could not have been nicer. And like, I said to him straight up, I said, first of all, Andy, thank you for inviting me to the show. Thank you to inviting me backstage. I'm gonna eat my words because you just delivered everything I wanted from Gang of Four
wow.
and more. Like I am humbly saying that you've won me over. I know I've been very critical of you over the years, doing what you've done without the other guys,
Rescue man. Yeah.
but I'm way in your corner. And it wasn't like, oh yeah, thanks, mate. That was good. He hung on every word I said. And he really struck me as somebody who it didn't matter if you said it was terrible.
Hmm.
If you presented why, he either positive or negative, he listened to you. Like, oh, like what are you getting out of this? He
Yeah.
had a genuine curiosity of what people thought about things. And I always respected that. I think he liked the
Tremendous.
fact that I was telling him like you sucked or you were really good because he knew it was coming from somebody who cared enough.
Right. I was just about to say that. He recognized that it was coming from a place of investment. Like you were deeply involved with his work. So I'm sure he responded to that aspect of it.
Yeah, great guy. And the fellows he had in his band towards the end,
Right.
all really, really nice people and fantastic performers. I was really excited to see where that
Was
band
headed.
to go. Unfortunately, we don't have that opportunity to know. Um, but yeah, talk about a performer who turned it around.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you were probably a little more open-minded than I was. Last time I saw Gang of Four was they played, I don't know if it was part of a tour or it was just a one-off at Irving Plaza, circa the release of Return the Gift, the re-release record, which was fucking brilliant. And I'd never seen the original lineup back in the day. I saw the shrink wrapped or the mall version and the shrink wrap version. But with Lawrence from Levitation on bass at one point, and I guess Gail Ann Dorsey was on bass, I want to say, at one
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and that was on when they opened for the Sisters and Public Enemy at Radio City. But I this was the first time I'd seen, Hugo and John and oh God, who's bass
Dave,
player?
Dave,
What?
Dave.
Dave. And they just tore the roof off. I mean, it was one of the most incendiary performances I've ever seen. But then, when John stopped, and then, I couldn't get behind. I mean, obviously the sound of Gang of Four was always going to be Andy. Um, and how they do now with who's the guy from Slint, I guess is filling in. Have you heard that
Dave.
iteration?
Oh my God, it's so good.
Is it? Okay.
Like,
I feel remiss in admitting this on a. on a YouTube channel, but I had yet to catch up on that, so I've got to
Well, I'll
check
tell
that
you
out.
what, that I mean, David Pajo from Slint
That's
and
it.
many other projects, it's one of my favorite guitar players. And he was already. And I had gotten to know Andy a bit, and I've known Hugo for a long time. I was kind of Switzerland, but also very vocal about what I liked and
Switzerland,
didn't
yeah.
like. So when Andy passed, I thought that's it. How could
Right.
we get a four? And then I saw the poster they put up like, of the four faces,
Hmm.
and I'm like, that's David Pajo. This could fucking work. Like if you're gonna have anybody play in Andy's part, having Pajo is fucking perfect.
I
And
mean,
it is, man. It absolutely is. They got Sarah Lee back on bass.
yeah, I saw that.
Um, we're never gonna have Andy, but we're gonna have Gang of Four without him. This is the lineup.
Okay,
Absolutely.
that leads me back tragically to Killing Joke, which is the same impression I had about the idea of Gang of Four without Andy Gill. I have about Killing Joke without Jordy. I can't conceive of it. I know there's been discussions in certain articles that have come up about what they wanted to do prior to his untimely demise. But I can't think of anybody stepping in to fill that void. I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Not in the same way. Although I will say this, and I know a lot of people feel similarly. I was greatly. Have you heard Light of Eternity as yet? Yo, of course you did. You put your piece out before I did mine,
Yes, I
fucker.
did.
Yeah, you fucker. Um, I love that record. I mean, it's obviously not Killing Joke, and it's very much its own project.
Mm.
But it checked all those boxes for me. Like I was really, and I think Fred Schreck, who we were discussing earlier, I mean, the versatility there is stunning. And I'll confess that I was unfamiliar with Paulie Williams from Chaos 8 prior to this, but I was really impressed overall. That's my favorite release of 2024 so far, without hands down.
Yeah.
But in terms of what the rest of the guys in Killing Joke do next, I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, they've always existed within their own world. And
Absolutely.
their decisions are entirely their own. All we can do is speculate, and there may be more interesting ways to spend time. But having said that, I mean, there are players out there who I think could capture the sound.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Paulie, for one,
Yeah.
does a great job on that EP. Um, Mark Gemini Thwaite, you know,
Yeah, he definitely has put the hours in and knows the material. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting.
there's a
Well,
guy I played with as well in Pigface. Um, and I'm not suggesting anything, but except to say that this guy, Steven Siebold, who used
okay.
to be in Hate Department, he plays on the second Damage Manual album when Jordy
Second one.
split.
Okay.
He plays on the second one. He took Jordy's place in the band.
Hmm.
And there's a song called Laugh Track by the Damage Manual. Look that up. Listen to that fucking guitar and
Okay.
tell me. I mean, Seabold can probably pull it off. But again, it's like, we're just people talking about private affairs we have no
Right. Right. I
knowledge
mean,
of.
did they may not even, I remember in the immediate wake of his death, people online were having these various sorts of conversations and saying who could do it. And I was like, you know what? They're not even in that headspace right now. They're right now they're grieving. They're going through all you know the process of dealing with the sudden loss of their bandmate, their brother, the future. So I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for any new development there.
And I would say, kind of as a PSA, just as a general statement, there
Hmm.
are certain people within the Killing Joke camp who are more public facing than others,
Oh yeah,
in social media and otherwise. Proceed gently these days, guys.
yeah,
Plans, maybe not mention Jordy's passing every 5 seconds might be a good way to start and let these men get on with it and be
absolutely.
sensitive to that. Maybe they don't want to be reminded of it every 5 minutes. That's just my soapbox
Mhm.
moment. It's let these men live their lives and
Absolutely.
appreciate the music, new and old, and not preface everything with tragedy. We've all been through enough of it the last 4 years, Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I hear you. Good point. Um, Go ahead.
Let's get into Killing Joke, man, because that is the connection that binds so many people all over the world. I have made lifelong friends
Oh, absolutely.
solely through my fandom of that band. I have never encountered another group that attracts more fascinating, wonderful, irreplaceable people than Killing Joke. I have seen them on both coasts, and I have met people at those shows I still know.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big Kiss fan, for example.
You and me both, man.
There's no other band on earth that has that phenomenon the way Killing Joke does.
I think, I mean, there are bands that like I prior to, yeah, like yourself, I was a tremendous Kiss fan, but that's kind of a different ballgame. I know the Stranglers have a very devout fan base, and you know, and the Mission, another one. But something, you're right, something about the particular uh brand of music that Killing Joke makes seems to attract a very distinctive selection of individuals. And to your point, like I traveled overseas to see them a few times at great expense. But again, I had people who I barely knew putting me up. Like they're picking me up at the airport. They're putting me in their spare room. They're helping me out. They're helping me navigate a city I'm unfamiliar with. Like they look after their own. And I was always struck by how gracious this community was to me. I was like, oh, I'm the freakish New Yorker that's into this stuff. Um, and it was, yeah, one of the takeaways from obviously the death of Jordy was not only is the band probably over, and I'm never going to see them live again, but I'm never going to have that same sense of community with those people again. Probably, like there's not going to be an event of that kind where I'm reconvening with those individuals from literally across the globe, uh, in that sort of shared experience. And that sounds very hokey and holistic and whatever, but it's true. Like it, it's a it's a group like precious few others, like that fan community.
Yeah.
And I don't know specifically what it is that brings that all together, but I remember being very much struck by it. So.
Well, don't be afraid to sound hokey because it's absolutely true with this band. I had Steve Silver on a few months back, their old
Mhm.
tour manager
Right, right. I think I saw that one.
these days. And he was kind of saying the same thing, like this sounds silly, but and the truth is there is an unspoken thing that connects people with this band. And the spoken things that connect people are interesting. You know, I've yet to meet a gatherer,
Mhm.
whether online or in person, who I didn't end up having a conversation with that went somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Killing Joke is great. Yeah, what's your favorite album? All that. And then it became we're talking about philosophy or art or technical writing or you know what I mean?
Right.
People
It's
are
not
fine in that,
like I don't mean to single out any other band, but I don't imagine that, you know, devout fans of, Creed, I don't know, or like or get into the same sort of I think you're right. I remember having some really heady discussions with members of the gathering about a variety of topics. They're deeply passionate about them, and they're not necessarily tethered to their feelings about the band at all. They're just like these are people who have deep investments in their enthusiasms, so it's not just like this isn't just entertainment, this is something deeper. And I remember being struck by that. Yeah.
and I think that it kind of lends itself to um being a writer and you may understand where I'm going with this in that it would be wonderful if something that we were to publish would get 1 million readers. Or in the case of being a musician, you put out an album that a million people will buy. But what's better, having a million copies of something sold where it's eventually disposed of,
Mhm.
it's not given meaning, it's a commodity. It's like, oh yeah, I like this song, blah blah blah, and then that's it. Or would you rather have 500 to 1,000 people fucking get
Right.
exactly where you're coming from, you know?
I would rather, to your point, I would rather resonate with a very specific, deeply invested audience than have that blockbuster, far-reaching thing that everybody thought was entertaining or whatever. Like, yeah, it's. I would imagine it's more deeply rewarding to make that connection than it is to just like, suddenly have the be the flavor of the moment.
Exactly. And Killing Joke has never been the flavor of the moment.
No, even at their poppiest moments or their where it seemed that they were poised to ascend to the next level, they always managed to fuck it up somehow, and but they were never gonna be warm and cuddly. They were. I mean, I do remember being when I married to a British lady, and she isn't necessarily as devout a fan as I am, but she grew up in London and in that same time period. I remember thumbing through her singles collection early on and pulling out a copy of Love Like Blood. I'm like, boom, that's it. I'm marrying this girl. She's got everything. Um, over there, they reached a greater level of exposure that I don't think they ever got here in the States. I mean, they will forever be a cult band. I hate that term, but nine people on out of ten you see on the street never heard of them and never will. That's just the way it is. But the connections they did make and the people that do appreciate them really appreciate them. Like it's no one's lukewarm about Killing Joke.
No, no. And that's so beautiful. And that's something I've always respected profoundly with that band. And they're also just very interesting people.
Oh yeah,
Is an incredibly interesting guy. Paul is a very interesting guy. Raven.
hilarious guy. I mean, and multifaceted as well. Like not just the thuggish cartoon character he was capable of being, but also a really interesting character. Youth, you know, obviously a genius. Yeah, they're very different but very interesting cats. Paul is incredibly thoughtful. Jazz is a million different people at once. Guy, he's been I've had exchanges with him that were warm and gregarious and some that were just sort of just weird. But he's obviously got a lot to say and he's an interesting guy. I'm curious to see what he does next, obviously. But yeah, they're not your average band by any stretch of the imagination.
No, no. And thank God for that.
Right, right.
Um, we're going to keep the fanboy train rolling here.
Okay.
So I want to talk to you specifically about another band that you're very vocal about in your appreciation. That, of course, being Cop Shoot Cop.
Cop shoot cop, yes. Yeah, that's really it. For me, it's the the two names, Killing Joke and Cop Shoot Cop. I mean, I love a bunch of other bands like Swans and Devo and XTC and a bunch of others, but it's always been those two. I first stumbled upon them probably 1989 or so and was immediately they were everything I wanted in a New York City band, and they were just like they were sort of dangerous and mysterious and obnoxious and provocative, and the art was great, and the music was so unique. I just thought they were fabulous, and their live shows were chaotic and scary, and they were just perfect in every way. Um, and I had the opportunity to get to know them kind of early on, and saw them several times before they imploded, and then obviously stayed in touch. Todd and I are friends to this day. Firewater is on the back burner at the moment, but I think it's going to come back. Obviously Phil's and Swans now, and he does other stuff. Nats is doing studio art, but he's been doing some music stuff as well, some more ambient sort of stuff. And Jim Coleman is doing Human Impact still with Chris from The Unsane, and he put a video up the other day that was really cool. So yeah, I love that stuff. I mean, on all the projects they're involved with, I have a lot of time for all of that. But Cop Shoot Cop for me, it's just I'm a geeky fanboy Cop Shoot Cop completist. Anything that is out there that they put out, I need to possess it. Like specifically for me, there's a flyer that was all over the Lower East Side circa 1990 for a gig they played at CBGB's, and I'll scour the earth looking for a clean copy of it, and I won't rest until I have it. But yeah, they're perfect.
And they were part of such an interesting era for New York.
Absolutely.
That late 80s, because that's when I was kind of learning about things. I was still a bit too young to go out to CB's. That
Hmm.
happened a little later. But, it was that time period where I had Bob Bird on not too long ago. So we're talking about
Right,
Pussy
right.
Galore. That was still a band working at the time. Boss Hogg, Unsane, um, Cop Shoot Cop, that's Live Skull.
Right. Surgery, I would throw in there. I
Right.
mean, I always want to throw Prong into that mix too, but Prong were kind of their own thing. I don't think Prong and Cop Cop ever shared a bill. It'd be cool if they did. Uh, but yeah, like White Zombie, strangely enough, were
Yes.
kind of that scene too. Everyone assumes that they were like this metal band from birth, but they were really more of the sort of noise rock aesthetic. Rat R, they were
Yep.
definitely one of those crews. Honeymoon Killers, Boss Hog, Pussy Galore, all that stuff. It was and the Black Snakes prior to Cop Shop Cops. But yeah, I loved all that stuff. That was great. The '90s was a really everyone thinks not everyone, but like the '90s is all grunge and gangster rap, but no, there's all sorts of sub communities of bands doing interesting stuff. And New York's noise rock community was completely cool. New York's hardcore community was still very active, and they were also like happening just across the street from each other. It was kind of like what we were saying before about when Phil was on with Drew. It's like you had Phil, who's from Cop to Cop, who's playing the Pyramid and places like that, and he's just across the street at A7. Actually, those don't overlap, but I don't know. It's just like there was so much going on in New York City at the time, and this is all prior to the whole Strokes era and all that.
Right.
Uh, what that's I think that's the thing I take the biggest exception to. Like I don't I forget her name, but the Meet Me in the Bathroom book
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
came out that documents that whole era, like the Strokes and Interpol and LCD Sound System and the AAS. I liked all that stuff, and I went to a bunch of those shows. But I remember getting that book for the first time and opening up the index and looking to the back, and not a mention of any of those, like no mention of Swans, no mention of Sonic Youth, no mention of Cops or Cop. Da, da, da. Now, in retrospect, why would there be? But she made it seem like that era was like the first era of bands since the Ramones to put New York on the map. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like there's this whole other scene happening prior to the Strokes and all that, but whatever.
Yeah. I can't say I was much of a fan of post 2001 New York.
Right.
Interpol was cool. Like I dig some of that stuff.
I
These
thought
were
the
guys,
first couple of records were good, but really, I don't think they were reinventing the wheel there. I mean, they were like, there's but
yeah.
undeniable. There's some good stuff there.
Yeah, I mean they picked a good wheel to copy, I
There you go.
guess. I dig them. I liked it the first time when I heard it with the Chameleons too.
There you go. I see you're naming names now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was glad they were doing it, but it was like, oh, it sounds familiar. Uh,
just a tad. You just mentioned Drew and Phil. We should bring viewers up to speed. You're referring to Drew Stone, host
right.
of the Hardcore Chronicles, which is on YouTube Wednesdays and Sundays, 3 to 5
An
p.m.
excellent long running series.
Yeah, I co-host with Drew now and then. Relatively recently had Phil Paleo on from Cop Shoot Cop and Swans, so that's the reference point. But I know you're pals with Drew as well. You wrote the foreword to
Right.
Hardcore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think how Drew and I came into contact. Oh, Drew's a hustler. He's got a million things going at once. And he had a Facebook page and he was doing his video channel. I think I became a fan of his series like 10 Questions with Hardcore Luminaries, like
Yeah.
Davey Gunner of Kraut and RB Corbett of Even Worse and stuff like that. And he did the great Michael Alago movie. And oh, that he did it with actually a former boss of mine acted as like a consulting producer, this guy Michael Alex. And so I guess that may have been how I met him as well. But he'd been we'd been noticing each other's work. I think I'd written a bunch of stuff alluding to his stuff online, and he reached out saying, "Hey, would I be interested in maybe contributing to these books he was putting together, hardcore flyers and stuff?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And he's just a really fun, interesting guy. Always got something cooking, a million projects at once. He's putting on live shows. He's making documentary films. He's got his, web channel. He's got his books enterprise. Like I am, it's kind of like I put you in that same category, Joel. Like I'm impressed by people who just don't wait for somebody to hand them a bunch of opportunities. They just go out and make them and they keep producing stuff and it's all driven by, it sounds hokey again, but driven by love. Like you can tell Drew is super enthused about the stuff he's doing.
Oh yeah.
And it shows in the work and you can't help but root for it. Same with you.
Oh,
Like the stuff you do, no matter what you post, I know you're putting a lot of love and thought into it and the enthusiasm is infectious. So
I appreciate
that's
that.
off.
I made a point from day one. I mean, the books I've published, have a cost associated with them, a price.
Of course.
I try not to be too egregious with it, um, but I can't give those away for free.
No.
But as far as the website and this, um, I work professionally in media. My titles have changed a bit over the years, but I've
Right.
worked for almost 25 years in media. Um, and when you're doing that for money, you very rarely call the shots.
Right.
You may have some level of authority, which I've had intermittently over the years, sometimes for long periods of time, but there's always someone else to answer to. So when I started my website and when I do this sort of thing, I do it intentionally untainted by money.
Yeah.
People have asked me, why don't you do like a Patreon? Why don't you have,
Yeah.
a GoFundMe to support your, or whatever it may be, why don't you have like a donation thing? And yeah, could I use the money? I work in
Certainly. Yeah.
media in 2024. Yes, I could use the money, but I look, I can get a TikTok star on this channel tomorrow. God knows I've been pitched enough of them. And I could get a few of them on and get 100,000 views. But at what cost? I have to want to do this.
Right. No, I mean,
And
I've to your same point, I've had people say like, why don't you get advertisers on your blog? And I was like, that then I'm sort of compromising my enthusiasm for it. Like I want it to be completely, to use your term, untainted by any sort of, you know, yeah, would it be nice if someone paid me a bunch of money to keep doing it? Great, that's fine, but that's not going to happen.
right.
And to me, I feel it would dilute the joy of doing it. I don't do it for that. I do it for my own edification. And I initially started doing it. Well, I was working at Time Magazine News Desk, and a colleague of mine at the time, this guy John Flowers, who's also a journalist, still working today, as a lark, he started his own blog. It was called Hot Johnny, and I started mine just to piss him off. I'm like, well, if that chimpanzee can do it, so can I. And so I started mine. He did his for like 2 or 3 years. I'm now closing in on my 19th year. So, and for me, it was an outlet when I had no other outlets. It's a means of keeping. I mean, in terms of writing, as I'm sure you'll agree, you're always learning how to do it better.
Oh
So
yeah.
you keep writing, you keep perfecting, you keep ideally getting better. So that's why I do it, and it's just fun. I just enjoy it, and the fact that it's resonated with, granted, probably a very select niche group of people, I find very gratifying. And I've made, like yourself, probably a network of new friends and contacts as a result. So it's great. I love it.
Absolutely. And going back to the money thing, I mean, I have a moral thing as well. If somebody's paying me for something,
Right.
I deliver what they are paying me for. So this kind of frees me of that, because if I
Yeah.
want to do a video, like I have Mark from the Chameleons soon,
Right.
but I may want to talk to the guy that used to book the VFW hall in Jersey back in the 90s, that
Right.
50 or so people are going to watch and
Right.
love.
It's a comparatively niche
You know what
concern.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like that freedom. If I want to talk to my old buddies in Jersey who came up with, I can do that. If I want to have Ben from the Sisters, I can do that the next day too. Nobody's telling me, well, you got to have a consistent, you
Well,
know,
I was very, you can imagine, speaking as someone on the other side of that equation, I was exceptionally chuffed to find out that on one side of my episode there's Ben from the Sisters of Mercy, and then we got Mark from the Chameleons, and in the middle there's me. Like I don't know when this is going to air, but I'm like, wow, I'm like, I'm rubbing shoulders with greatness. So I appreciate that. I mean, I imagine the viewership of this particular episode may be very niche as well, but
it's
all
about
good.
the conversations and the experiences. I want to document um, people I find interesting, people I respect who have stories. There are scenes all over the country that are beloved by the people in them, that mean the world to them,
Mhm.
that may not necessarily be known outside of that state.
Oh yeah.
So that's why I've been focusing so much on Jersey, because New Jersey has such a massive history exclusive to itself. There you go. I
There you
was
go.
listening to that
Best
yesterday.
thing that came out of New Jersey. There you
Oh,
go.
oh, I have to agree with that. Grew up with those guys.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, people talk about Bon Jovi, but it's all about the misfits. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, there's New Jersey is a rich, rich history of culture that I think gets largely overlooked.
Yeah. There's even a Killing Joke connection to Jersey because Atkins lived in New Brunswick for a
That's
while.
right, right, right. And also like did Killing Joke ever play Maxwell's?
Yeah.
I think they did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
King Joke.
circa Martin Atkins. They did. I think during the extremities era.
Yeah. I think it was under some name. It was like three shows. I think it was CB's, Maxwell's, and somewhere else, but they gave us some like lofty title.
I think the other one was the possibly the first time I saw Killing Joke is the Cat Club on
That's
13th
what,
Street.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. That was an amazing show. And that was boy, really we're geeking out now. This is TAFE was on bass, not Raven.
Mm.
Prior to Raven.
Do you
TAFE
know?
Ball.
I gotta find that guy. Do you know he did a band in the 90s with Dave Lombardo, um, Millie from Creator, and Gabby from the Cro-Mags.
What?
Yes.
What year are we talking post Killing Joke?
Yeah,
I'm
this is
guessing.
like mid 90s.
What a weird lineup.
And I believe the band was called Voodoo Cult.
Ooh, Colt.
But it's like that was the lineup. Lombardo, Tafe.
Kind of an amazing lineup.
Yeah,
Let's
Gabby.
track that down. That's our new mission.
Yeah. So I gotta look into that to find out how the hell that happened, because
I'm
that's a
trying to think who would if anybody would know where TAFE Ball is, I would say reach out to Martin Atkins. He could probably
yeah,
tell you.
yeah. I'll perhaps track him down. You'll probably get the drummer on that album to talk to me too about it. But we'll see.
Mr. Lombardo. Yeah, that's isn't he just did what's that festival the Misfits just played at? Like the No Values?
Yeah, out in
He
Cal.
was on that. Yeah, yeah.
He's an interesting guy. He did a record last year, solo record. It sounds like Tito Puente
Yeah,
types.
it's nothing metal. I saw him. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be that guy, but I saw him on in Soho on Prince Street, and I was like, Dave Lombardo, but left him alone. And then Kerry King now lives down in Tribeca. I haven't seen him. I work down in Tribeca, so my eyes are always open. He's a pretty hard guy to miss, I'd imagine, but I haven't spotted him yet. But yeah, I have seen Taylor Swift, but no, no.
See,
That's
that's
very
what I'm
true.
jealous about because the other two, I've been there, done that. But Taylor, my girl Tay Tay, that would be great.
No, no, no comment, Joel.
I love Taylor Swift. I don't give a shit. Taylor Swift is the best songwriter of her generation.
All right.
Period.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
We've all got we've all got one that, people don't understand. I'm sure you've got a couple that are like, why
oh,
are you listening to that?
oh, please. When you get as old as I am, Joel, you're not there yet. You realize that what other people think of your listening habits really doesn't matter.
No.
I embrace everything. So like what you like. Don't
Yeah,
apologize for any of it.
yeah.
How old are you, Joel? This is a terrible question.
I will be 46 in
Oh,
5 weeks.
uh,
47 rather, 40.
to be 47 again. Yeah, no, I'm 56, so a little ahead
Remember,
of you.
remember I was talking to Genesis Peorge once,
Ah,
and she's like, how old are you? And I said, well, I think at that time I was 41 or whatever. No, I
mm,
was, yeah, maybe 40. Oh, you're a baby.
yeah, yeah. Oh dear. I have a funny story about Genesis, which was a number of years ago. I got two kids who are now one's still a teenager, the other one's 20. But at the time, we were looking for a bigger apartment, and we heard of an opportunity down in a neighborhood of Lower East Side called Two Bridges, and it's like these giant Robert Moses condos on the water. And so we go down and look at one, and it's nice, not great, but not bad. And so we leave the apartment, my wife and I, and we're standing on the elevator landing, waiting for the elevator and discussing like the pros and cons of the apartment. And suddenly the elevator doors open, and out onto the landing walks Genesis Peorge, who gives us a polite smile, and then walks to the door of the apartment right next to the one we were just looking at. And I'm just visibly shell shocked. And my wife's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I'm like, "Do you know who that was?" And so we get on the elevator, and I explain who. I mean, my wife is pretty savvy about music, but she's not familiar with Robbie Gristle or Psychic TV. And suddenly the notion of, if we'd taken that apartment, I stood the chance of being next door neighbors with Genesis. And I was like, I wonder if we'd like, borrow cups of sugar from each other and stuff like that. But we'll never know. But yeah, so almost could have almost been his neighbor, her neighbor, excuse me.
I will say, we've talked about interesting interviewees.
Oh boy. Yeah.
She was next level.
Oh, I'm
I
sure.
don't think I've ever encountered a more intuitive um, listener and narrator. She would hear you say a minor point and then go for 20 minutes
On a
and
tangent.
loop
Yeah.
right back around to whatever your point was earlier in the conversation.
It's definitely a unique mind
Mm.
and a true artistic force to be reckoned with. Unlike, I can't think of anyone else who even comes close. But
I've got hours of unpublished, unshared interviews with her.
did you ever speak to the Coil guys like Sleazy and John Balance?
I missed out on them. I have interviewed Chris and Cozy, but I didn't get around to Peter. I reached out to him, I think, a bit too late. Like
Right,
it wasn't terribly long before he had passed.
right.
John had gone already at that point. Did you?
No, no. I think it was a combination of not feeling I knew enough. I had an opportunity to interview them at one point when they were on Played Against Sam Records. I forget. Early on, I think they just put out Love Secret Domain and they were doing press for it. And I didn't feel prepared. And I think I was actually a bit intimidated because all I knew known about them prior to that was like horse rotorvator, I should say, and scatology. And I was like, wow, I feel out of my depth. And now later on, I've delved way further into their discography, and I really wish I'd seized that opportunity because they're incredibly interesting guys, or
Oh,
were. Um, but I think I think I chickened out, Joel. That's what I did, and I rue it to this day. But what are you gonna do?
well,
Can't win them all.
who are some artists who, up to this point, because we don't know what the future is going to hold, but
Right.
who may be some of the ones who've gotten away from you? at this point that you'd love to interview?
I would love to speak to Andy Partridge of XTC.
Hmm.
I was always a big fan of those guys. Although, I mean, they did an excellent documentary a couple of years ago, and he doesn't seem especially, um, I don't know. He seems a little thorny, but I think he'd be interesting. And I love their music so much that I think it'd be interesting. I think Julian Cope would be
Hmm.
entertaining.
Yeah.
Um, I got to interview Gavin Friday a couple of times way back when he was doing his first solo records, and he was really excellent. Who got away though? Let's see. I never got to speak to anybody in Motorhead. That would have been fun. Um, obviously everybody would like to have spoken with David Bowie. That's not that that almost goes without saying. Um, I did have a couple of conversations with Merle Allen, as in Gigi's brother,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
these were informal conversations, and he was always surprisingly I don't want to say lucid, but he was surprisingly conversational.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Earl's a nice guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
He did something a couple of years ago for a website or a web series called Soft White Underbelly
Yes.
that was illuminating. But obviously there's a rich wellspring of material to discuss with that man. I don't know at this stage who I'd be, I never got to speak with formally with Billy Duffy of the Cult. I think he'd be kind of interesting. Um uh and my lifelong heroes in Devo. I never interviewed them. I'd love to speak with them. I think they'd be uh delightful.
I never interviewed Mark Mothersbaugh or anyone from Devo, but I can tell you I know people who have,
Yeah.
including a colleague from the magazine I started my career at. His reputation is impeccable as an interviewee.
Oh, I'm sure.
People
Well,
love,
he's also like a seasoned composer and he's he's an affiliate of the performing rights organization I work for, so he's does a lot of stuff for them. I've seen volumes of material he's done. I think Jerry would be an interesting. uh he's a little bit more of a bite to Jerry Casale, but I'd love to talk to those guys. I just thought of another one. Hold on. I think the guys in Love and Rockets would be curious to talk to.
yeah.
I mean, I love all that stuff. Peter Murphy, I don't know about, but I love all those records. Um, I don't know. What about you?
Well,
Who have you yet to track down?
I've done all the Love and Rockets guys, and they are the best. They are, you know, blokes at the bar kind of vibe. There's no
Oh, that's good.
pretense. Super nice guys. All of them, really
Hmm.
cool, really cool people. I never interviewed Peter. I did meet Peter.
Hmm.
Same thing. Same thing. Just, there's a certain thing with the Brits, if you get the right one,
Yeah,
the guys in Sabbath are kind of like that. There's no like pretense or anything. It's
those guys especially seem very grounded,
yeah.
uh, which is surprising given the magnitude of their impact. Like you would think at this stage they'd be like, impenetrable, but they seem very cool.
As far as my hit list, like my wish list, because of where I grew up and my entry point into music as a fan, I've yet to interview someone from Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
I would love to do. Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and U2.
Hmm.
Get any of those three, I can probably wrap it up at that point. It's
Really?
I work here
Uh,
with them.
I've spoken with Joe Elliott on occasion. He's really funny.
Hmm.
Um, I did once, uh, well, I was working the crew. This is at the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Had an exchange with John Bon Jovi that I'm going to tell you about when the camera is turned off. Um, and who was the third? Oh, wait, Bon Jovi, Def
U2.
Leppard. Oh, you too. Well, yeah, I talked to Bono. But and he was lovely, I have to say. It was great. I no longer count myself as necessarily a member of the U2 army. I kind of fell out. I haven't. It's been a while since I picked up one of their records, one of the new records.
Yeah.
But I'll always love that era stuff.
Oh yeah.
My
Oh,
blood.
me too. Me too. I love them up through Octung Baby. Like they could do no wrong up until Zoo TV, which I loved.
Oh yeah.
After that, it kind of I don't know. Like
I think pop was really the point of departure for me. Like I really wanted pop to be better than it was, and it just didn't age well. And I guess, and they had select singles after that, like "Beautiful Day" and whatnot. But yeah, I think "Achtung Baby" is really the pinnacle
yeah.
before everything sort of went south.
And for my money, you can't mess with the Joshua Tree.
No, not at all, not at all. Anybody who suggests otherwise is just being contrarian, because
Yeah.
that's a great record.
There's a reason why that record's a classic. It's just
Absolutely.
amazing. That was, I mean, they were kind of like not as huge, but in many ways, they were kind of like the Beatles of the 80s in a sense. I mean, they were coming from a different side and it
Right.
took them a long time to get there. But the Joshua Tree is as important as Revolver, is as important as Sergeant Pepper, in my opinion. It defined a decade.
Yeah. Well, it certainly did that. I would say they're different from the Beatles in that they were still a grower. Like they
Mm,
were sort of a niche. I mean, I always put them like neck and neck with like, REM and the Police. Like there's these bands well, less so the Police. The Police pretty much were hits right out of the box, it seems like. But with both REM and U2, they gradually built a very loyal following, and the rest of the world had to catch up. Suddenly along comes, I mean, Unforgettable Fire was a big record, but Joshua Tree just blew everything wide open.
right.
Um, and that changed. And suddenly they went from being, quote unquote, our band to being everybody's band. But they handled it well. Like I went to a bunch of the Zoo TV shows at Giant Stadium and in Philadelphia, and it rivaled what I imagine. I never got to see Pink Floyd perform The Wall, but that same sort of
Yeah.
large scale spectacle, and make it work. It was definitely unlike anything I'd ever seen, at that time. Now, I got to say, I've got no desire to see a show in the Sphere. That seems so counterintuitive to me because it's like it almost renders the band incidental, because you've got all the effects and whatnot. But I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be you two in that venue, but I can't imagine who I'd want to see there.
I mean, maybe Kraftwerk. I could see them doing something interesting there because like they themselves aren't much to watch,
Yeah.
but the screens they bring with them are quite something. But with U2, I think for me the appeal was that these four guys making this music. I don't need all the bells and whistles.
Right.
But I don't know, to each their own.
Well, as we wrap up, let me ask you this. You came up professionally when there were magazines and newspapers. Imagine that.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
I entered my industry just as things were beginning to change. Within the first 3 years of my career, it was pretty much a done deal. I worked for a niche market in automotive. The
Mhm.
company I worked for still publishes print magazines, which is amazing.
God bless them.
Um, but as far as entertainment media, um, I mean, like I said, within a couple years, it was done.
Yeah,
And God, I mean, look at what we're seeing now. So having had a career during that sort of
era.
concluding era and where we are now, I mean, what are your thoughts on this ever-changing, ever-frustrating model that we're seeing now with social media leading the way?
The topography, as you just eloquently illustrated, has changed so radically. I mean, the writing had been on the wall for a long time that print was no matter print of all description, not just music journalism or automotive journalism or news, was becoming anachronistic and the future was all online. But I can't help feeling that something was very much lost in the the migration of all that content to an online format, because now it just feels like, I'm very loyal to certain outlets online that post content. I hate you keep using that word, that I think is worth reading. Like, I'm a big fan of The Quietus. You ever read that?
Sure.
Yes. I mean, a lot of it is really esoteric stuff that I'm not familiar with, but I think it's written so beautifully that it makes me want to seek that music out. It inspires me to broaden my horizons. Um, but it's there's too much noise. It's very hard to find a single voice that is I'm willing to follow loyally in the face of so many options. And it's just a different world. And it's funny, I was recently interviewed for this student film, and it was still like record stores now versus record stores then, and I kept on banging the drum about what a fan of the tactile artifact I am. Like, and I think that counts for actual magazines as well, and reading and periodicals. Like, I like to hold it in my hand. I like the way it's laid out, and how it's presented. I think you lose a lot of that when you're just reading stuff online. And there's also the discipline of writing stuff online. Things tend to be shorter and not as in depth. Yeah, so I honestly don't know what's next. I think there's obviously been a democratizing of the media, and everybody now has greater access to the raw materials in order to post their own stuff. But it's in many instances led to just cacophony. There's too many voices and not enough of them. What was a Susie and the Banshees quote? Like, too many critics, not all of them writing. What is it? I don't know. There's a lot of voices and not all of them are worth reading. That's my point, I guess.
Yes.
Uh, but I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. So if anybody wants to send me links to things that they feel are worth their time, our time, I'm all eyes. So,
Well, I appreciate you mentioning the documentary because we should get into that a bit. It's called B-Sides,
oh
correct?
yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a lark, actually. My best friend from high school is this guy named Rob, and Rob and I had a devout practice of, after school or on weekends, hitting the then robust network of independent record shops in and around Greenwich Village, Soho, East Village, etc. And there were many back in the day, and that's we would hit each looking for whatever it is we were looking for. And it was just a great way to learn about music and find more things and meet people along the way, and be a part of this community. And anyway, Rob has a niece. It's his sister's daughter, who grew up hearing us every week bitching and moaning about this stuff. And when she was in high school, she mapped out where all these old places were, and this sort of interactive website was really impressive. And then short years after that, she became a film student at the New School and a budding documentarian. And so she was putting together this documentary about record store culture, and asked me if I, wanted to contribute. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I did. And it premiered about a month ago and won all sorts of awards. It's like this 20-minute, short documentary. But I was blown away. I mean, first of all, I'm all over it, which is weird, but she managed to edit out my stupider moments, which you may have to do with this. And no, it was great. It's a nice little piece. You can find it on Vimeo. Her name is Catherine Aramo, and it's called B-Sides. And if anybody's curious, you can also find it on my blog.
So it's free to stream.
I think so, yeah.
Because
It's not on YouTube, but it's on Vimeo.
I have seen it because you sent me the link.
I keep pushing it down people's throats.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, one thing I will say in response to some of the points you made in the film, if you make it up to Massachusetts, particularly Beverly, Mass,
Yeah.
there's a store called Bridge Nine.
Okay.
There's a hardcore label called Bridge Nine Records.
Right, right.
Guy that runs that label started a brick and mortar store about a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
So, and he has a clothing line. I think his clothing line is called Sully's.
Okay.
And he sells his own releases there, of course, but he's got a ton of other punk and hardcore, some classic stuff in there. But he's got a record store, and he's got this huge space in the back
Yeah.
where he has live shows,
Oh, nice.
art shows, vegan markets, and just general meetups. And
Cool.
it's become the hub in this. I mean, it's about an hour and a half for me. It's worth the drive. It's become a hub for all the old Boston hardcore people,
Oh, cool.
vegans, artists, weirdos, you know, and I've had such great times there. Drew's buddies with those guys.
Of course.
Bridge Nine, his band has played there. H2O's played there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really cool spot, man. So
Well,
that's the
I'm
I can think of right now that's trying to really, and they very successfully capture the spirit of a hub, going to a record store. And I've met so many people just being in that store. You know,
great. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like there is places like that, at least here in New York City, are few and far between. I mean, there used to be, all over the place, but now it's a very different city. So I'm encouraged to hear that.
yeah, check it out if you can sometime.
I will.
I just did a video recently with a fellow named Dave Tree.
Okay.
He's in the band Tree in Boston. They're like an older, like 90s hardcore band. I met him at Bridge Nine one day, and I'm like, "You're really cool. You should come on my podcast."
There you go. That's how these things start, Of
Yeah, Al and Nancy from SSD and
course.
Slapshot guys are all always around that scene in that store. So you get that greater sense of history, and you get the new characters turning up, the younger people. It's fucking beautiful, man.
I
Because I
will
grew
seek it
up
out.
like that. I grew up with all like Generation Records and
Oh yeah.
Venus Records and all the places in Jersey we used to have. Two Tone and Let It Rock and Cafe Sounds. It's an era that's gone for the most.
Right. And I live in the very neighborhood where a lot of these places used to be. And so every time I walk out, if I'm ever going out with my kids walking down the street, I'm prone like, oh, that used to be Rocks in Your Head, or that used to be Venus Records, or that used to be It's Only Rock and Roll. And they're like, yeah, yeah, Dad, whatever. Um, it's all part of, my New York City experience, but what can I do?
Well, I'll definitely link the film
Oh, thanks.
when I post the
I
video.
know the director would be super excited for you to do that, so I appreciate
Oh,
that.
and of course, I'll link to your blog as well. Um,
Thanks.
yeah, definitely. People can check that out, and I would really recommend people do so. If the viewer likes what I do and the viewer likes my website, understand before I was even crawling doing this stuff, Alex was already up and running. I consider you an influence and inspiration in my early days.
Oh, God bless you, Joel. Well, but I may have been walking ahead of you, but you caught up real quick. I've been huffing and puffing trying to keep up with you. So it
Well,
works both
what's
ways.
important is I got the first Light of Eternity review out. That's
Yeah, well,
all that matters.
just wait for the second EP, man. We'll see who gets that one up.
Watching you,
All
Smith.
right. There
Watching
you
you.
go. You bring it.
Um, all kidding aside, I have a great respect for your work and what you've done. I've quite enjoyed our online relationship over the years. I'm thrilled
Likewise.
came on the podcast to chat a bit, and I sincerely hope it's the first of many conversations like this that we have.
Outstanding. Let's make that happen. And Joel, thank you so much. I'm incredibly blown away that you asked me to begin with, and I hope we haven't alienated large swaths of your audience with this.
Not at all. And we will do this again sometime.
Cool. You let me know. I'll be here.
Fantastic. Thanks
All
again.
right. Cheers, Joel.